Okay, greetings and welcome to another Pan African Community News Network. It's been a long time. We've been away for a while. It's the 1st of October. It's just we passed 7 o'clock. We've got a jam-packed program for you as ever. Got quite a lot of news to catch up. We've been away for a few months over the summer break, so it's going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to try and get through as much stories as I can. What can I say? What can I say? We're live as usual. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. I think we're streaming on Twitter. I don't know how that works actually. So I'm very curious myself to find out. If kind of like what the interaction will be like. But Sister Oleander will be joining us soon, and then that way, if you have comments you want to make as usual, please feel free to say a hi, give us a sound check, let us know that you can hear me okay, you can see us okay, or if you have any questions or any comments you want to make, please put them in the chat, and then we'll try and respond to that. Please bear in mind with me, we're probably going to have a few technical gremlins. This is not exactly the same setup as it was before, kind of like making a few changes to the studio and stuff like that. So some of it might not work perfectly, but the content, as ever, hopefully you'll find engaging, and you're joining and share your feedback and comments on that. So I'm going to go to the section as I normally do. We always start off with our libation section, and which we call We Remember. And it is good to be back, but unfortunately, as ever, because we start with the section, we always have to go through sharing details of those that we have lost. And I'm going to start off with the name of Boyega Odubanjo, my apologies, who joined the ancestors recently. He was an incomparable award-winning poet. And unfortunately, there was a search that went out for him. You might have seen it on the news, and then a few days later, a body was found. He was 27 years of age when he joined the ancestors. He lived in Bromley, South London. He'd been due to perform at a festival called Shambhala in Kelmarsh, but obviously he didn't arrive for his set. Now, the police have said there's nothing suspicious. They're not looking for anybody else in connection with his passing. I don't know much more details than that, but of course, this section is really just about remembering those who have joined the ancestors. The next libation we're going to make is one to a name that I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with, and that's the amazing and now, unfortunately, ancestor Horace Ove. Now, he was a director of many films, the most famous being Pressure, but he also did Baldwin's N-Word, which was also an amazing documentary on the visit of James Baldwin to the UK. But Pressure was the first full-length African-British film, essentially, that dealt with the experience of Africans from the Caribbean migrating to the UK. He passed away, I think it was a week ago. Actually, it was a week or 2 weeks ago. He was 86. I think I found out it was the same day that Amma was screened at the BFI, which is a restoration of a classic film, African spirituality. But we found out through Facebook, which is today's modern age, unfortunately. His son posted a comment saying that his loving father Horace took his last breath at around 4:30 in the morning, and all I can say is that it's a massive void in our cultural history, in our cultural life. He was one of the first of that set who started. I mean, of course, you've heard me speak about Menelik Shabazz, but Horace Ove was part of that sect that initiated that drive for independent filmmaking in the UK, telling a story from an uncompromised position and also representing narratives that we just wouldn't hear. I mean, so we remember. The next libation is for a man that, not many people will know his name. His name, Tony Wade. And Tony Wade joined the ancestors. But he was, even though many people are not familiar with him, if you say Dyke & Dryden, then it might ring a bell. Now, Dyke & Dryden was an amazing company and an entrepreneurial success from what people refer to as the Windrush the Windrush generation. Tony Wade was a businessman. He was an author. He was a community activist for that. Well, maybe not activist, but philanthropist. I think it's probably better. He came from Jamaica in 1954 as part of the Windrush generation, and he joined. I think he became the CEO of Dyke and Dryden, which was this amazing company that was set up in Tottenham, designed to cater for the needs of African people, and they're here, especially those from Caribbean heritage. And he always gave back. He always kind of helped and worked people to learn how to engage in enterprise, how to develop their businesses, and looked into issues like young people's employability. So he joined the Ancestors at the age of 90. He was in Jamaica when he passed, and we remember. Now, the next name is a name that maybe only a few of you will be familiar with. This is who of the same generation as I, and that is the amazing Errol Hines. Now, Errol Hines played Haile Selassie in what was and still is a landmark play called, well, I say play, but presentation called Black Heroes in the Hall of Fame. Now, this was a presentation with a massive insight, around 50 actors, singers, dancers, musicians, technicians, and they all came together in a kind of like, I think the term that's been used is organic pageant, and they were continuously sharing the history. In fact, I say the history, over 5,000 years of history of African accomplishment, with a specific focus on all of us in the diaspora as well as on the continent, so that, when I say organic, is that they can continuously refresh it. I mean, it ran for many years. It came back in 2007 after a hiatus, and it's still fondly remembered by those who are old enough to remember when it came out, and really took the theatre, for storm. And I'm talking about in a community perspective. We've never seen ourselves on stage represented in a positive light, and having living icons, kind of like living actors, sharing the contributions of what we had achieved. So Hines, Elder Errol Hines, joined the Ancestor. I think he was active until he passed away. Unfortunately, he lost this battle with cancer. And I should actually speak about that, because I spoke about Horace Ofer, and I think he had Alzheimer's. Sometimes what's happening is, and I was having a conversation with the amazing Tony Warner today. I went on an excellent Black History Walk tour in Hackney, and we were just discussing how actually what happens, that a lot of people engage in activism, as well as the risk of constant exposure to racism, kind of like increasing your risk of psychosis or bipolar or schizophrenia, which is one of the risks. There's also a risk of things like Alzheimer's happening as well. So I don't know. I know he had Errol had cancer, and others have had Alzheimer's. And Mavis Best, I think, had Alzheimer's as well. But I just want to say all of that thing, and just ultimately say thank you for the work that he did. We remember. And another passing, and it is really important that we do this, because often what happens is that when we are sharing libations, we often forget that libations aren't just for people who are famous. They're not just for people that we see on television, people that are kind of like known to everybody. They're also for those who have made a contribution. They're for us, for all of us. It's one of the challenges that we have in the African community, that we, in the West, I'm talking about, because back at home we won't have this problem. But in the West, and when we make our homes in places like the UK or the Americas or across the European continent, what we often we don't see is libations for those who cared for us, those who are close to us. And so we remember Mrs. Gwendolyn Price. She was originally from Jamaica. She was a resident of Brixton and Tulse Hill for some 66 years. She peacefully joined the Ancestors from home on July, or I think it was the 25th of July this year. And she was the beloved mother of brother Colin and his sister Annette. And I just remember that we sometimes forget to include ourselves, our own pain, and also our own stories, and our own transitions. When I say, we don't do this back in the motherland, or sometimes if we're in the Caribbean and wherever our heritage hails from, it's because the local papers actually will pay tribute to the school teacher, to the nurse, to the doctor, to the road sweeper, to the counsellor, to all of us. And so we're not made to feel like our lives are meaningless and like we haven't contributed. We have all contributed. We all have some level of work that's worthy of actually remembering on our passing. And so, again, not all of you will know of Mrs. Gwendolyn Price, and she made a serious contribution just to our community life by raising her children and looking after those in their immediate family. And we remember. And the last passing, which is a very recent one, is that of Elana Adam. I don't want to say too much on this because it's an ongoing case, but this is something that's touched all of us. I say all of us who been keeping up with current affairs. Eliane was murdered. She was killed recently on a bus in central Croydon as she made her way to school. She was 15. We'll come back to this story later on. I just want to say that it's a life too young. It was a senseless death, tragedy. But we remember, and we'll continue to fight for justice to prevent these kind of tragedies happening again. Wow. Okay. So yes, this is the part of the program when we start going through news. We're going to go to the politics section. Just as a reminder, you are watching the Pan-African Community News broadcast. I am your host, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. We should be joined by Sister Oleander. So please feel free to go on Facebook and send tweets and YouTube and send comments or whatever they're all called and stuff like that. I have no idea if it's going out to Twitter and if that's working. I'm going to find out. I'm not sure I'm really happy with it going to all those platforms, but you know what? I like to experiment a little bit. I did use Twitter Spaces not too long ago, and that was a really interesting phenomenon. It's kind of like a live radio program, but on Twitter. So I'm prepared to give it, a test run and see what happens on that one. But this is your program. I'm sharing the news as it's happened. Normally we do 4 weeks, but I think we're doing probably around 12 weeks backlog, condensing it as much as we can. But there's a hell of a lot of stuff to go through. I'm just summing it up, and it's your program. If you want to make some feedback or some comments or something, that's what the chat is for. But I'm going to keep going on until we get to the end of the program. So the next story is that of the abuse that was faced by our sister, the amazing immigration lawyer, Sister Jacqueline McKenzie, or Jackie. And this is a bizarre story. I say bizarre. I mean, I've been through this kind of nonsensical thing before. But what's happened is that our sister Jackie has been doing some amazing work. She works at I say she works, she's also a senior partner at Lay Day, which is a solicitor's firm, and so she protects and defends the law and makes sure that those who are vulnerable in society have some kind of legal recourse to injustice. So she works with migrants, she works with the Windrush community, and she's done some exemplary work. And because she's been doing that work, what we've been seeing is her constant drip feeding to the press, what they call briefing, against her. And then what recently happened was that the Conservative Party sent a dossier to all of the rabid right-wing papers, trying to kind of damage her reputation. Thankfully, it didn't work. I mean, she's got a lot of fans because of the quality of the work she does and the integrity with which she holds herself. But again, it doesn't change the fact that what they were doing was immoral. And the Law Society and Bar Council have hit out and that she, made a comment, a public statement saying, this is not on, this is not right. That, the dossier that you sent out was not only the wrong thing to do, it's also inaccurate, and it was designed deliberately to stir up trouble, to stir up abuse and attacks against her. And so it's quite unique, in fact, that actually there was a joint statement from the Bar Council and the President of the Law Society actually condemning the behaviour of the government, the Tory party in particular, for actually challenging her work, when actually all she's doing is upholding the law and protecting the most vulnerable in society. So we just want to big her up and just be aware of, as we move towards a general election next year, of the nasty tricks that you'll start to happen and you'll start to see occurring in the media. The next story follows upon the same line, and that's the one about our sister Dian Abbott. Now, Dian Abbott has, we've spoken about her many times on this program, the amazing work she's done, her legacy, being a beacon, a role model for young women of African heritage to engage in politics. You don't always have to agree with her politics and always the way that she conducts it, but what you can't deny is that she has been an anti-racist all of her adult life, all of her political life. She hasn't backtracked on that. And we spoke about this story where she issued a statement to, I think it was The Observer, a letter to The Observer, and it was a bit clumsily written. I'm not going to go all over that again. It was clumsily written, and she apologized straight away. She withdrew her remarks. She recognised, she was suggesting, there was this hierarchy of racism, and she was right. And I'll be very clear, what she was saying was actually correct, but her phrasing of it was very clumsy and insensitive. But what happened was that she was suspended from the Labour Party, and that happened in April. And to this day, she still hasn't had what they call the whip restored. So she still is not officially able to, hold Labour office, which means that when the general election comes in, there's this really weird possibility that she won't be able to be an MP, that she could be voted out. I mean, I think her reputation stands before her, that she has to stand as an independent, just like Jeremy Corbyn, that there's enough people who have had personal interactions with them that they will support her, even if it's not under the Labour brand. But this is kind of like what's happening today. This is what's going on. And I just wanted to raise this case because, the Keir Starmer Party is claiming that there isn't any kind of conspiracy, that there isn't any kind of problem, that they've done an investigation and they're still waiting for the results before they decide whether they're going to let her back. But this is taking too long. There have been other people who have engaged in racism and they've solved the issue quite quickly. This is clearly a purge of what they call the left wing. They're calling it the far left, which is a ridiculous term, but it's just basically people who are socialists, people who care about other people in Labour, who are just being purged out because the leadership is petrified of anyone who has a kind of radical heart, perhaps derailing their aspirations to get into power. So, I thought I'd share that one there. I think I could see Sister Oleander joining us. Greetings, Sister Oleander. Can you hear us all okay? Or me okay? Are you there? Greetings.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, coming over loud and clear. Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the show.
Excellent. Okay. And just so everyone knows, we should be on Facebook. We should be on YouTube. And I said we're joining Twitter. I don't know how interactives work, but you can send us comments and Sister Oleander will flag them up and read them out and ask questions, etc. It's an interactive program, even though I talk a hell of a lot. It's an interactive program. It's your program. And we're going over almost 12 weeks. So it's like 3 months plus worth of news. So there's a lot to go through. Okay, I'm going to continue with the program, and let me go to the next slide. And okay, so I don't really relish looking at that face, but this is, as you all know, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, and I'm not going to engage in Suella Braverman said this and it's outrageous. Suella Braverman said that it's outrageous, and just that's what she wants. It's a game she plays. Rishi Sunak knows exactly what she is, how she works, and keeps her in office and keeps her in one of the highest office of state for a particular reason, and it works. It brings the races together. But what I will talk about is the fact that she actually made comments during the case of Chris Cabot. We're going to talk about that later, which is an ongoing murder trial. And the comments she posted on social media could be in contempt of court. Now, you've got to understand, this is someone who's actually, she's, I don't know, she's a lawyer barrister. I mean, she has, she understands the law, but she's just abusing her office to interfere and to throw, red flags to try and make sure they beef up the racist support for police officers who are being, or a police officer who's being prosecuted for murder of suspects. Now, she shouldn't have made any statements because that is contempt of court. And what happened with this particular case was that the Solicitor General ordered publishers and editors and social media users not to publish material that could prejudice the ongoing criminal investigation and potential prosecution. So she's known about this, but she ignored all this information and she just said, look, she tweeted something about, we depend on our brave firearm officers to protect us from the most dangerous and violent people in society. And I'm telling you, in the interest of public safety, they have to make these split-second decisions about shooting people under extraordinary pressures. And I don't want to see them caught up in the dock or investigate for murder in the case of a shooting. She should not have made these statements while the case was live. Whether she'll get away with it, we'll see. We're going to come back to that story later on. But that's what's going on. That's current. That's right now. Okay, so a slight change of tone. And this would almost be hilarious if it wasn't so, disgusting. I mean, this is the story about the thefts that have taken place inside the British Museum. Now, we've covered the theft of cultural artifacts and the hoarding of it in British museums for quite a while on this program. But recently, we found out that there was some 2,000 items from the museum's collections that had been found to be stolen or missing or damaged. Now, if you remember from previous programs, the defense that the British Museum always uses when people, and I say people, I'm talking about nations, say that they want their artifacts back, the ones that were looted and plundered, like the Benin bronzes or the Parthian marbles. They argue, well, we keep them safe. We can't be sure that if we return them to you, that they won't get damaged. And so we are a world museum. We are a universal museum. The British Museum is for everyone to come, and it's for all the peoples of all the world. Well, what we now know is that, well, that's not absolutely true. What's taking place is that they are, kind of like losing them because they haven't kept correct records. They don't even know, how much plundered items they actually have in their repository. So the amazing sister, the MP Belle Ribeiro Addy, she's a member, or I say member, I think she's the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations. She says that the law is a law from 1963 that prevents the objects being returned should be changed. And I think she's right. When she says that law is antiquated, it's an insulting reason that they're being given to other countries, saying that they can't take care of the items which is theirs, which they want, when in reality, people are nicking them from the British Museum. You also have people stealing it who employ by the British Museum stealing it, or the British Museum staff, and obviously not all of them, I'm not saying all of them, but damaging them, while they're cleaning it, causing harm to priceless artifacts, things ending up on eBay, for example. This status quo can't stand. So that's that particular story. The images that you can see there as well, because there's two things. I was told about there was what's that program, the Antiques Roadshow program, and I didn't see it myself. But what happened was that they found some what somebody in the audience found some Ethiopian robes that were that were given as a gift. And from what I can tell, I don't know the whole story. I only read it like a couple of hours ago. I didn't see the program live. And what's happened is that the host said, well, if there's a claim for them, would you return them? Would you repatriate these objects? Because this is coming through colonial times, even though Ethiopia wasn't colonized. There's a whole long history of it. So would you agree to them be repatriated? And the people who had the artifacts said, yeah, we're having, as a family, we're discussing this, but if there was a claim for it, then we would repatriate it. And so all of the right wing, all the racists, they came up frothing at the mouth, saliva and drip. And they're like, no, what are you talking about? You shouldn't have been asking that question. We had some professor or lecturer from Oxford who's an expert in kind of like cultural artifacts from certain eras saying he shouldn't have even asked them that question. It was given to them. There's no question about it being plundered, blah, 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 blah. That's one issue. That's one picture that you can see over there. The second picture you can see over there is that of Egyptian artifacts, which we now know. This is news again. I only found out about this like a few hours ago. I missed this story, so thank you for our researchers for sharing this with me. They actually found out that the British Museum were buying artifacts from convicted antique smuggler. You get that, right? So it's a convicted antique smuggler. This is someone who's stealing these items, faking the provenance documents. British Museum not doing due diligence and checking the artifacts and purchasing them. So this is a den of inequity. And so I don't think the British Museum has any moral ground that they can stand on when they talk about these particular types of issues. But anyway, let's move on. There's so much news to go through, but I want to share that with you. The next story is, it's probably not a surprise to you, but we have the story about the plaque, or about the statues that are in the City of London, and they did a consultation. It looks really progressive. They asked the right questions about what should they do with some of these artifacts that are glamorizing mass murderers. And when I say mass murderers, I'm talking about people who are involved in Ma'afa, people involved in the history of enslavement. You have people like John Cass, the statue of Cass there. You have the statue of Beckford there as well. And these are all people involved in slavery. There's no question about it. And so the City of London did this, kind of like consultation. It was at Guildhall. I think, Legally made a contribution to this as well. I know our brother, Professor Robert Beckford, kind of definitely made a contribution. He spoke with them directly. And you've got to remember that one of the statues is of William Beckford, who in the 18th century was a slaver. There's no doubt, no question about that. And so all of us were clearly saying, look, we want these objects to be removed. We're not, if you don't want to destroy them, fine, put them in a museum, but don't put them in a place where they're elevated and where people can actually think to themselves that we're glamorizing, that we are worshipping, we are seeing people who are mass murderers as something to be who are laudable. Well, after all that consultation, and now that the anti-racist kind of like clamor after the murder of George Floyd has started to dissipate, Guildhall or the City of London have come back and said, okay, no one's looking anymore. We don't have to do no black squares. Okay, what are we going to do? What we're going to do is contextualize everything. We're going to make plaques. We're going to keep the statues exactly where they are in prominent positions, and we'll put nice little plaques on them. And the plaques will kind of like tell people about their history. And of course, they're not going to use a language that you and I would use. So, our brother is just, he's made some really poignant comments on this about how African suffering is still not treated as fully human suffering in society. He's talked about it being like a moral failure of the city to not recognize this. Unfortunately, that's where we are on that particular issue. Okay. Now, this is another story that I would rather not have gone through, but it's an important one. I don't really like to promote people who are just beneath us, to be honest with you. But this is the story of Richard Medley. Now, Richard Medley was interviewing the president of Guyana, Ifran Ali, on this program called Good Morning Britain. I don't watch it. It's one of these, I don't know what you call them, current affairs. It's not even current affairs. It's kind of like a magazine breakfast program. I don't know what they do. They just chat far and kind of like, hello, good morning, how you doing? And today we're going to look at the weather. We're going to look at, kind of like, it's just a nonsense program. And this clip, you can find it on social media. Again, see, I feel dirty even just going through this. But essentially, our brother, the president of Ghana, was going to address the leaders at United Nations. That's where he's at, right? So he's a president. He's going to General Assembly. He's going to go to New York. He's going to talk about, share the idea and explain how the UK still benefits from its historical role in the enslavement of African people. But somehow someone didn't do due diligence and booked him onto this program. So he thought to come to a program. He thought, okay, I'm a president. I'll deal with this issue. This is a historical fact. Let me deal with it. And this clown, this Madley character, the one who's, if I remember correctly, he's a shoplifter as well. I mean, I don't mean like someone who's poor shoplifting. I don't have a problem with someone who, I get it. Some people have got no money, no food. They shoplift to kind of like look after their families, and to feed their children. No, I'm talking about like a kind of kleptomania kind of shoplifter. So this guy who's a TV presenter starts talking to a president with such a level of disdain, such a patronizing, banging his fist. What do you mean? We owe you reparations. It's like, what, you're going to go to the palace? You're going to talk to the royal family and what, Arch of Buckingham Palace? And he was just the most disgusting, patronizing treatment. And our brother, he just kept his cool and answered everything back and just made it about justice. So we're not asking for the palace, we're asking for justice. He just made it clear. But this should not have even taken place. And so there's been more than 300 complaints to Ofcom. Ofcom is the media regulator about this interview. And so, like I said, you can watch the clip on social media. I'm sure it'll be on YouTube by now or whatever. But this is the state of affairs in the UK. And I think, and the reason why it's on this program and the reason why many of us recognize it as a form of Afrophobia is because if he was talking to, let's say, Joe Biden, for example, if he was talking to Netanyahu, for example, if he was talking to any other state leader, he would never have spoken with such disdain, with such disrespect on that platform. So, and it's a national platform, Good Morning Britain. So, I mean, I'm glad the complaints have happened. Let's wait and see what happens. I haven't covered the nonsense that happened on what's that, GB News, the stupid that channel which has a Dan Wotton, Lauren, what's her name, something Fox, and Calvin Robertson. They've all been cancelled from the channel. I haven't got time to go into that. That's good news. That's all you need to know. That's good news. Whether they come back, we'll see. These people, these clowns have a habit of bouncing back. But we have to be mindful, and this is the thing I'm going to say. We have to be mindful about what platforms that we go on, because when we go onto platforms like GMB, and we also validate them, our credentials make them seem like they're worthy, like our president shouldn't have been on there. Anyway, I'm going to move to the next slide. The next slide is going to deal with a tough section. This is going to deal with the topic of policing in the UK, and because we've been away for such a long time, most of the stories are not going to be nice. I suppose this is like a trigger warning. I've never had to give a trigger warning, I think, but just to let you know that this is going to be it is what it is. Just a warning that the stories sometimes are going to be harrowing. I'm going to whiz through them quickly as we do, because time is not on our side, and I said we've got a lot to catch up. And this is just a tip of the iceberg. I cannot capture all the stories. So just as a reminder, you are on the Pan-African Community News broadcast or program. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. So if you have any comments, any chats, please just let us know that you can hear us okay. Please feel free just to click on and say hi. Normally it's we see interactions with you. Maybe we've been what's that term they use? Shadow banned. Maybe we've been shadow banned. Maybe now that we've been away for a long time, the state has thought, oh great, let's get people to forget them and kind of like leave them languishing in the dark and stuff like that. I don't know, but we're back. We're here. We'll be here every fortnight, just doing a summarizing some of the news as it's happened. So please, if you are listening, drop us a line so we know that you're listening, that you can hear us clearly, etc. But in the meantime, as always, you know me, even if it's just one person watching us, I'll go on. So let's go to the news. Now, the first story is the one that is essentially it's attracted the most headlines over the last few weeks. That's even longer than that, last year. And this is the story of Chris Kaba. Chris Kaba was murdered. I shouldn't say that. I should say he was killed last year with a bullet through his head. He was unarmed. This happened in September, and in Streatham. It was in South London. And we have reached a historic moment. Happens very rarely in British history. I think it was only David Olawale who actually also saw police officers convicted, or not convicted, prosecuted for criminal offence. But what's happening is that the officer who's been accused of this murder is now on trial for murder. Now, this officer's got a lot of privileges right now. He's only been, his name's been anonymized, so he's only been referred to as NX121. The judge has actually ruled that I think the anonymization can stay in place. You know, this is a serious development in the history of you know, kind of regulating the police when it's involved in the killings of people of African heritage. But what happened, as I spoke to earlier when I discussed the actions of the Home Secretary, Cyril Braverman, is that the police officers have gone crazy. And I'm talking about the armed police. They call it AFOs, armed firearms officers. And over, I think it was 2 weekends ago, they downed arms. They said, if you're going to you know, prosecute one of us for the murder of an unarmed man, then we're not going to carry guns anymore in the UK, because it went beyond the Met. But you know, and they downed arms. They effectively went on strike. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but police officers can't really go on strike because they're not really employed. They're appointed. They're, you know, so they don't. It's a completely strange, bizarre. They make a pledge of leaf of alliance to the king. It was the queen before, and so they're not. You can't really fire them. They had to get involved in misconduct, and then you get rid of them. You kind of like, and you let them go. But by going into a strike, what I call a wildcat strike against working conditions, they actually all acted illegally. Now, Metropolitan Police had to, what's his name, Rowley, had to speak to the army, and the army had to provide backup for the police, so that there was enough firearms on the streets to provide a deterrent for terrorist threats or any kind of like instance of armed violence. And one by one, the officers slowly started coming back on duty. I don't think they're all back on duty, but they're all coming back on duty. So there's still significantly fewer firearms officers available than when they started their strike. But that's, again, highly illegal. And so this whole idea about there being a police force and a section inside the police force that is unaccountable, if that sounds familiar to you, it's possibly because you had a look at the Casey report that we covered a few months back. And in the Casey report, in that inquiry, she spoke about her investigations into the firearms unit in the police. And she spoke about their culture, where they are seen as an elite group. They're seen like a club. They have a toxic culture, which is only sexist, which is racist, and it's very much a law unto their own. And so this all ties, everything she said has been borne out over the last few weeks by their actions. The way the Federation stands up for them, the way they've gone onto social media, and they've got their colleagues who go onto social media and they're attacking people who are actually saying, look, you know, we want you to do your job. And they're saying, well, we volunteer to be a firearms officer, so, you know, we're just withdrawing our volunteering. I mean, that's the nonsensical argument. So we're going to follow this case. It's still ongoing, and we'll see what happens when the evidence is shared in court. Remember, those officers have, as they maybe marginally more access to the information about the case than we, the public, have. So they don't know all the facts. All the facts they know is what we know. And the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, they have more details, and they thought it was sufficient to pass it to the CPS, the Criminal Prosecution Service, who actually thought it was sufficient to charge him with murder. That doesn't mean, however, that he's going to be found guilty. But this is part of the process. And the fact that officers would go on strike, police officers who are legally not allowed to go on strike, and that's another question for another day, whether that's moral. But police officers show you that the police officers who serve the law, who are employed or deployed to enforce the law, don't actually believe in the law, that they themselves are forcing us and harming us, and in many cases killing us to uphold. That's a big issue. I should also say, just so you know as well, I issued a complaint to Metropolitan Police a few days ago, and I made the case that actually all those officers that actually engaged in that wildcat strike, they should be under investigation for misconduct. And if they were found guilty of misconduct, then they should be barred from actually holding a gun ever again. Because remember, not all the firearms officers engaged in this strike. Some of those firearms officers said, you know what, walking around with a gun and the potential to killing someone comes with a huge responsibility. And even though I might not like it, if I have to shoot someone by the grace of the Creator, then what will happen is that I expect that my decision is going to be scrutinized. That's only right. Those officers, I have no problem with them holding the guns, because you understand that they understand, and they support the idea of scrutiny, of justice. But all those other officers, nah, nogoso, nah. I'll leave that there. That's sorry, my long preamble for that one, but it's a big case. I made a complaint to the police. The police 2 days later sent me a statement saying that actually, because none of those officers affected you personally, we're not even going to investigate your complaint. So I've had to just kick it back to the IRPC, and I'm going for an appeal on it. So the odds that I can actually get the police to investigate the police for actually breaking this law is so minimal. But you know what? We'll keep trying. That's what I do. That's what legally works. And you have to be involved in those kind of processes as well. Shouldn't all of us have a role to play in this. Let me move to the next story. There's a lot of police stories, and they're not all very good. The next one is about this officer, Thomas Phillips, 34-year-old, who sent these grossly offensive and racist terms to his ex-girlfriends and her new partner. And he has been jailed. He used WhatsApp. He was a serving police officer. He comes from Croydon. He denied doing it, but he was found guilty, which was good. He eventually pled guilty, but initially denied doing it. This is the tip of the iceberg. There are calls, and I'm kind of supportive of them, that the use of social media platforms like WhatsApp, which are encrypted end-to-end by serving police officers, might have to be monitored. Just the same way that people have drug tests if you're an athlete and they do it randomly, might need to do that with police officers. It might be one of the parts of the job. They carry an incredible amount of power. And what we're seeing year after year, I'm talking about a Casey report. It could have been a McPherson report. It just goes back and back. What we're seeing is that it's not just a few bad apples. It's an institutionally corrupt, racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic institution. And until that has been addressed, then people should really be, expecting that they're going to be tested for integrity. And I get it. I'm not a fan of surveillance, workplace surveillance. That burns me. It just feels something wrong with that. But the police are just not, anybody else. They've had this power for centuries, and they've abused it. And not only have they abused it just to enrich themselves, they've abused it out of spite, just because they want to be racist, or they want to be sexist, or they want to be homophobic. So, this is what's happening. I'll keep going on because there's a lot of news. This story, if it doesn't remind you of some of the foolishness that we have to deal with.
Sorry, Toyin. Christopher Pothermont just messaged to say hello.
Oh, greetings, Christopher. Nice to have you with us, and thank you. That means I'm assuming that you can hear us clearly. Yeah, I'm going to continue going, and thank you for sharing. Remember, this is your channel, okay? So if you want to say something, you want to make a comment, jump on board the chat. Sister Oleander's in the studio. We'll read them out. If you want to make a comment, you can disagree with me as well. If you think Toyin, man, is just being too harsh, the police do a tough job, and you're just kind of roughing it up for them. They need more powers, then say those things, and let's deal with this. But this is your news program. Today's program is a little bit different. It's going to be a bit longer because we're trying to condense as much news into the short space that we have. We normally do 4 weeks, but this is actually on over 3 months worth of news condensed. We cannot cover everything, but we're trying our best. So this is the story of how the Metropolitan Police have launched an investigation into the case of a young man who was attacked by a police dog in the streets. And this is after the police were called to deal with an incident. This 19-year-old, remember, he's a teenager. He was left with serious injuries and permanent scarring to his arm. And you've got to remember, whenever he sees that now, it brings up trauma. So his mental health is being severely affected. His family are saying that he needs some serious help. Now, Scotland Yard police are saying that they're going to look and make sure the full facts are examined in detail. But dogs, the police dogs themselves are being deployed as weapons. You might have been hearing all this stuff about bully XL dogs, and those are irresponsible owners. But we should be having those same discussions if a police dog is being deployed by a police officer, because they're trained to hunt, to bring people down. And if you're using a dog as a weapon against a teenager, and it's leading to serious injuries, which include permanent scarring, so that boy for the rest of his life will always have to, recall and that trauma that he went through. The police force needs to be cleaned up. This is the story there. Let me go to the next one, because there's quite a few. That wasn't the only.
Sorry, Toyin. We've got another message from Christopher. He says, "Yes, I hear you clearly. I'm in Canada, but I hear England is very racist."
My brother, yes, it is, and thank you. It's good to know that we've got an international audience as well. You're out, listen to us. I mean, we saw what the Parliament did in Canada the other day with the applauding of that Nazi war criminal. That was outrageous, and we probably haven't got scope to do that. This is a Pan-African program, but we do lead with stories affecting what takes place in the UK, because we know the perception of the UK from many people outside. I mean, it's nice to hear that you're aware of some of these issues. Think that everything's fine for us, that we don't have any problems, we don't have any challenges. So it's good hearing you share that with us, and welcome to the program. I don't think I've heard your name before, so thank you for being with us. Now I'm going to continue on about young people being hard, because I just spoke about that other teenager, but they get younger. This image that you can see is that of Jamal Pow. Now, he was 16 at the time, and he feared for his life when he was stopped and searched by the police officers. Now, they've actually paid out damages in this case. They haven't admitted liability, but they've paid damages, because not only did they stop and search him, they handcuffed him, they ordered him to kneel in the street, and they had a taser pressed on his neck. So it was outrageous. I mean, he says that now, since that happened, and that was in 2020, he's been targeted by the police some 15 times. So he's over his short lifetime, he's had at least stop and searches done 30 times. You've got to understand that this is a 16-year-old, and what this does to you, what it does to you and your ability to see yourself as a stakeholder in the UK, to believe in the legal system, it's crushing. Anyway, like I said, he sued the police, and they settled it before a few trial, gave substantial damages. They're paying the legal costs. To be honest with you, they've not admitted liability. I would have liked to have had them come out and admit what they did, so that other officers who are engaging in this bully boy tactic, where they're putting our children on the floor, putting tasers to their necks, and actually saying, well, you fit the description of someone, and he didn't fit the description, by the way. You fit the description of someone that they know that if they do this, then actually that's their job. It's like we still don't have confidence that's what's taking place. And paying people out, it's good for the family and stuff. That's not going to help with his mental health, but it's good that acknowledgement isn't enough. Let me go on to the next story. This, surprise, most of you won't be surprised to hear this one. And this is just a story about 5 former Metropolitan police officers who admitted sending racist WhatsApp messages. And this is kind of the reason why I'm kind of saying that we might need to have a spot check on certain officers. I don't know how that would work, but that's something I would work with, to design a system that was equitable, that's fair, that didn't invade the rights, but protected the public from rogue officers, because it's not just a few rotten apples in a barrel. We now know that's just a myth. Now, these officers were using WhatsApp because of its end-to-end encryption, so they felt they couldn't get caught. Sometimes it takes one good officer to come out and say, look, this is what's been going on. They were tweeting about Megan. I'm not going to go into all the stuff, but they were charged for over 2 years worth of tweets. And one of the officers, Rupert Lewis, he pled guilty to 8 accounts. Some of them were quite old. They're quite senior. So one of them, this one was 62 years old. And it's quite scary that what happens with them, though, is that when they retire from the police, is that they then move to other jobs. So he became a Home Office official. And that's quite scary, because can you imagine that a police officer who had a long career in the Met, sending racist tweets in private to other police officers, then goes into a government post as a Home Office official, harming, well, potentially with the possibility to harm the most vulnerable peoples in society. So he was, according to a government department, dismissed for gross misconduct last November. I don't have details about what he did at the Home Office, but there's a trend going here. And what we also need to recognize is that when it is these senior officers, who are, 62 years, he's older than me. So what happens is that they carry a certain level of authority. And so that authority trickles down and sets the benchmark for new officers and younger officers who are less experienced. It tells them what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. So you have to hit them. You have to hit them hard, because if you don't, the culture just keeps on repeating itself. It just keeps going on and on and on. Let me move to the next story. Hey, yeah. And this one is the story of we've done a lot of work on Child Q. In some ways, this is a good story. In fact, in all ways, it's a good story, because essentially what's happened is that the police have finally come to a point where they've recognized that, and the policy is been adapted to say that if an officer is found guilty of gross misconduct, that they can actually be fired. They can lose their job, and that wasn't the case before. They'd get a guilty result, and they get slap wrist and go on and abuse other people. So the officers involved over the situation of the intimate strip search of Child Q, and I'm not going to. We know what happened to Child Q, and for those of you, as I just realised, for those of you who knew, Child Q was a 15-year-old who lived in Hackney, the area where I'm living right now. She was at school in her exams, and a teacher applied what we call a pre-crime test on her, which is, if you've seen Minority Reports, she thought she could smell drugs on her. So she went engaged in full sus mode and said, "Oh my God, you got drugs on you." She said, "I'm doing my exam. You've got drugs on you." So she called the police. The police dragged her out. And when I say dragged, I've got to be careful. They took her out of the exam. They put her into a room and they strip search, including her intimate body parts, this 15-year-old girl who was on her menstrual cycle in the school without any adults present, no parents, no nothing. It's the most disgusting, outrageous abuse of power I've heard in a very long while. This happened in December 2020. And so it's taken all this time before we found out about it. There's actually, I was going to put a video, there's a link to the CHSCP, which is the Child City and Hackney Safeguarding Committee practice. They have a partnership. They have a video which outlines their investigation, which is actually quite good. It's quite short. It outlines what's happened and what they've been doing afterwards. But essentially, community came out, protested against this, and we still didn't know if the officers were going to be sacked. Because of the age of the child, she's referred to a Child Q. But now we know is that those officers involved are facing misconduct hearings or gross misconduct hearings, and if they're found guilty, then they could lose their post. People say sacked. Like I said, they can't be sacked. They could be dismissed. But yeah, that's good. There's also a fourth Met officer who's going to face a disciplinary meeting over the fact that no appropriate officer was there. So there's those that was involved in intimate search and those who authorized it. The policy is changing Hackney now. They can't do intimate body searches without permission, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't change the fact. And I'm worried about all the other cases that took place in 2020 when, we were in lockdown. We didn't know, there were so many arrests disproportionately affecting people. It's a big problem. That's that story.
Sorry, Toyin, there's a message from Mr. Fall 3 saying, "Just wanted to say it's good to see you again, Dr. Toyin, and you too, Sis Oleander. Good to see you too. Well, not see you, but read your words."
Thank you for joining us, Miss. What would you say, Mr.
The Fall 3.
Mr. The Fall 2. Well, thank you very much. And it's good to have you with us. Good to know that you can hear us as well. You know what might be nice as well? Whereabout are you as well? It'll be good to get a little map of where people are and where they're listening, because we kind of need the story about what's taking place in the UK to get out there. This is the one thing I worry about. Britain is so good at the kind of like this mask and this presentation of everything is cool, kind of everything is reserved. There's nothing to see here, nothing to see here. When what happens is that we're living here and we feel this oppression on our neck. So like, anyone else who's out there, any different areas, you can just put in the place where you are. It's fine. But I'm going to continue on with the story because this is the story.
Sorry, Toyin. Tafari says, just hopping on. Greetings, beautiful people.
Oh, greetings. Is it sister or brother Tafari? So,
Tafari.
Pardon? Tafari. Well, greetings.
Tafari or Tafari? I'm not sure. But I think it's a brother. He says, are you familiar? Oh, sorry. He says, are you familiar with Black Power Media based in the States? I can connect you with Dr. Jared Ball.
Thank you. That might be quite useful. Perhaps what we can do is kind of like every alternative one, we guest on each other's and we learn what's happening in the States, and the States learns what's happening in the UK. This is one of the good uses of this technology. But yeah, thank you for that. And just drop us a line afterwards. That might be a useful thing to do as well.
It's brother Tafari.
It's brother. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to continue on sharing the news. There's quite a lot. I said that this section is going to be quite heavy. I'm so sorry. The police. This is like the tip of the iceberg, but we're bringing the ones that come like are up there just to give you an idea of the scale of the problem. And and like I said, we've only been away for like 12 weeks. This is let me keep going. So the next story is that of how the Metropolitan Police roughed up our sister Bianca Williams and her family, and they're currently having a tribunal. They're engaged in a discussion, or I say discussion, in a trial, trying to seek justice. After I think the term was aggressive and confrontational Metropolitan Police officers stopped the car that they were in. And like I said, when I say they roughed her up, there's no other words. You have to see the video. The video's out there. I think I saw it on Channel 4. It might be Channel 4 or BBC, but you can find the video where they dragged them out of the car. And they were doing something because they were African. They lied. They said that they could smell cannabis, but clearly didn't have cannabis. These are two, like professional athletes, Olympic class athletes. Her partner is the sprinter Ricardo dos Santos. They had their child in the car. They're not going to be smoking. They're not going to be doing drugs. They can't do. This is what happened. They roughened up. The police officers have all denied the charges. You can see the video footage. The case or the tribunal is going on. It's a shame it's a tribunal because in some ways, tribunals are good because there's a lower burden of proof. But on the other side as well, it's kind of like I kind of want criminal action taken against these officers. So they roughened up. They said, okay, we think you might be part of a gang. They said they're going to bring a police dog to search the car. They were innocent. They were innocent. So this is an ongoing tribunal. Like I said, all this stuff is current, all these stories, and we're waiting to see what happens. So please, give your love and support for the family. But it's just a reminder that no matter how high you climb in British society, no matter what you're doing, you could be running for the country, you could be a minister. It's like, it reminds me when Oprah Winfrey went to, I think it was France, to one of the shops, and they roughed up there. Like, who are you? You coming to shop? This is an expensive shop. What are you doing here? Oprah, who? It doesn't matter who you think you are. It's like, what's it? Skip Gates in the States, when the police kind of arrested him in his own house. You broke into you live in this house, and they arrested him in his own house, and he had to call his mate Obama. And then what do? They had a little beer talk rather than dealing with the structural issues. We have to be eye on the ball and not let this go away. These things really need to be criminal prosecutions, but one step at a time. Okay, another story, and then hopefully, there's a few more, and then we can move to other topics. Again, the police. This is actually a legacy case. This is a story of our brother and his wife, actually, bank manager Dell Seer. Now, he's suing the police after he was arrested in 2017. 2017 is when I think I started my my PhD. This is like 27. This is how long it's taken. It's over 5 years, and he still hasn't got justice. and he was wrongly accused of firearm offences, money laundering, and they just put him in some kind of nightmare when he went. All he was doing is he was going to pick up his partner, who was 35 at the time, from a train station. And then they did their thing with the police cars and blocking him. They searched his home. You know, he lost his job. They froze his bank accounts. And you're a major criminal. Rah, 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 rah. I don't. They call it intelligence-led policing, but I don't know what happened there because there didn't seem to be much intelligence, and they just damaged, you know, his life. His partner and him, they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. They start to doubt themselves, their own mind. They're getting panic attacks whenever they see a police car. Is it going to happen again? So they're still fighting. Suing the Met for negligence, malicious prosecution, and you know, kind of like abuse of public office, breach of statutory duty, all kinds of stuff. And we just have to keep our eye on this case, see where this happens. You know, I'm sad if this is going to be a civil prosecution. Sometimes that's what happens. The system doesn't help us. The system, you know, kind of like, you know, leads us to kind of like find the money out of our own pocket to secure justice. And you know, what can I say? I just hope the guy and his wife kind of hold firm, and they get the justice that they deserve.
Toyin, Safari just messaged to ask what the best way is to contact you, and he'll do so to facilitate the connection.
Okay, thanks. Just drop me an email. I'll just I mean,
he might not know your email. Yeah.
Yeah. So toyin@legali.org is probably the quickest way to do it. I'm not very good with social media. I know people send me things on Twitter and Facebook, but you can send me a message on
Should I put it in the chat?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Well, no, actually, maybe not. Because what I don't want is my account. This is what used to happen back in the day. They used to hack into our servers and try and bring us down with denial of service attack. Just drop me an email, and I'm quite easy to find. I don't, you know, I mean, I'm accessible. I'm not one of those community leaders that pretends that I'm above everybody. So drop me an email and we can bounce back and forth. But I don't want to put it in a chat because unfortunately we have enemies, and our enemies.
Yeah, he said great. He's got it. No worries.
Give thanks. Okay, so let me continue with this story. So this is our sister, Chantel Danielle Folks. Now, I only found out about this like a couple of days ago, this happened 2 years ago. It happened in 2021. Now, this is a sister who was just on her way home. She had a child, a son, who's aged 5 years old with special needs. She was just minding her own business, and then a police car, you know, whizzed past the street. She let that car go. She continued crossing the road, and a second police car came at 85 miles, just under 85 miles an hour, and it knocked her dead and it killed her. Just that's it. Her life is gone. 25 years. She hasn't even lived. Her child now is motherless. And the Met are saying they're making all the right noise. It's a tragedy. They've reviewed its training, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure the officers will go on speed awareness tests and unconscious speeding training or whatever sort of stuff. Our sister lost her life. Now, one of the officers, what's his name? Patel. I wrote it down somewhere. Nadeem Patel. You know, he's actually gone to jail, which is good. He's for 3 years. I don't actually know it's long enough for dangerous driving. But what can we do? How can we bring that woman's life? What can we say to her children? So this is just another story I'll share with you. This happened in 2021. Didn't even know about the story. But the prosecution has just taken place, and the family are going out there saying that police cars, or, you know, and officers should be subject to a speed cap in built-up areas. And I tend to agree. If you think about the recent stories, the children in Ireland who were on their bike and the police hit them with the van, and they crashed after kind of like a chase with a police van, and they died. I don't think the police hit them, but they died after that speed chase. You know, we're hearing stories often of this kind of like testosterone officers who have got video cameras everywhere, so they can track them. Doesn't matter where they go, they can track them. They don't have to engage in this kind of like Y50 kind of like, you know, Mission Impossible type, but chasing down streets and killing people by accident. And I'm not saying it's deliberate. I'm saying it was dangerous driving, and it was completely irresponsible. So, you know, maybe we should have put our sister inside the We Remember libation section, but our sister, we do remember you. And, and your son, your prince, we're sorry for your mother having to join the ancestors so early. The next story is, how do I talk about this one? This is our brother, Zodok Obatola. We don't have an image for him, which I haven't shared it. He lost his life after police tasered him, and he fell off a fifth floor balcony early this year in April. Now, he was 52 years of age. I suspect he was having a mental health crisis from what I can read. I've read a lot around the case, but it's just, the details are still a bit sketchy. At least 2 of the Metropolitan police officers are under criminal investigation for gross negligence, manslaughter. So, I mean, no one's saying that they did it deliberately. What we're saying that you acted irresponsibly. I think they received a call that there was a guy, shouting. He was at risk. He said he's going to jump from the balcony. They called somebody to come down and talk him down and stuff like that, and which to me sounds like the right thing to do. And he was obviously, up from what I can hear from that, was that here's someone in mental distress, here's someone in pain. But then what happened is that it started taking some time. They kept on negotiating with him. So some of the officers just stayed in the guy's flat, and then one went out. And from what it looks like, one officer must have just, I'm guessing, I shouldn't say these kind of things, but it's coming like one officer said, you know what, Chad, this is taking too long. Let me just taser him. And, he tasered and he fell off the balcony and died. So we'll find out more information, or we hope to find out more information. It's not often that the police are silent when a criminal investigation starts for something like gross negligence, manslaughter. So, there's something, what's that saying? No smoke without fire. But we now know in the UK that the Metropolitan Police have said that they're not going to attend mental health call-outs unless there's an immediate threat to life. And in some ways, to be honest with you, I think that's the right thing. If you look at how they did Sean Rigg, if you look at how they did Christopher Alder, if you look at so many innocent people that they've murdered who have been in health, Sheku Bayu I mean, so many people were having mental health crisis, Dalian Atkinson, and the police intervene, and all of a sudden someone's dead. So the fact that they're not doing it, I know people are like, well, if they don't help out, what's going to happen? Well, we need to find, do what we need to do to get out of, get a proper government. And I'm not talking about Labour, but a proper government that actually puts funding into mental health responses and making sure that they're resourced to help. Because if I was a police officer and somebody was going to jump, if I had to stay all week talking to that brother to kind of reason with him, to get into a space where he feels like life is worthwhile, I would have done that. I wouldn't have just pulled out a taser and just shot like 50,000 bolts through him. But I don't know the details, so I'm speculating. We'll see what happens. Okay, and the last story to deal with the police it's a bittersweet story. It's a good story. It's a bad story. I don't know how to, which way it goes round. And this is the story of our sister, Jennifer Ezeko. We was watching an interview on Channel 4 News. They did an amazing job covering. It's an amazing interview. If you can access Channel 4 News, just type in Channel 4, go to catch up and watch her interview. I can't say that enough. And she actually worked for the IOPC, so that's the Independent Office of Police Complaints. And was it? No, it wasn't the Independent Office of Police Complaints. It was the first version of it. The police complaints are for the police. So the IOPC, just a little bit of history, and I'll be very quick. It's changed so many times because we keep finding out it's corrupt. So when I was conscientiousized, when I joined the Pan-African movement, it was called the PCA, the Police Complaints Authority. But then what they were doing was letting off corrupt police officers. They were involved in the corruption. So it was disbanded, and eventually it was turned into the IPCC, which is the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And then that was caught out, letting off corrupt police officers, engaging in corrupt behavior. So that was changed into the IOPC, which is where we're now, the Independent Office of Police Conduct. And every time that it's changed, it's the same organization, Same police officers investigating police officers. But every time it's changed, its powers have got weaker. The government of the day has weakened its ability to hold the police to account. So she was in the middle. She was part of the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And what happened was that she was saying, look, she was investigating a case, saying there's racism in this case. And they was coming up to her and saying, what do you mean there's racism? Well, just let it go, man. Like the complaint coming, let it go. Just like when I sent the complaint to the police the other day, the one I just told you about. It's like someone just, what are you talking about? Just let it go, man. Just tell them blah, 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 and done it. She said, but that's not what I'm here for. You know, you've employed me. You employed me for my integrity. I'm investigating. I'm telling you, we need to look further. And so what happened was that they started turning things on her. And they spent over £1 million pursuing a criminal investigation against her. £1 million. She was a former commissioner at the IPCC. Now, you know, she was cleared of all charges, but I can't tell you the stress it takes to have the whole state, the whole police force, all its unlimited power trying to criminalize you. So she was cleared. She just says it was a ridiculous amount of waste of money, of taxpayers' money. It was fueled by racism. And the joke is, on top of all that, the police said that she was using racism. She was being racist to them because she was explaining how some of the colleagues, those of European heritage, were actually just engaging in actions that they wouldn't have done if the person they were investigating wasn't African. So they were saying, no, you are being racist. You know, that kind of reverse racism nonsense. So I think I saw something on the Channel 4 News where they invoked the McPherson report. So this is the story. But it's a good news to end on this section on, in the sense that, you know, she was cleared of all charges. She's left the IPCC. She now works as an organization trying to improve, you know, these policies and these bodies. I mean, you know, good luck. I think she's amazing for what she's done. But just heads up that, you know, even when you work inside them trying to do the right thing, they will come after you. They will come after you. £1 million trying to, and not like a civil prosecution, a criminal investigation against her because she dared to speak up. She was cleared. Okay. So, once again, you're watching the Pan-African Community News Program. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander, your host. What can I say? We're just going through the news from the last 12 weeks. So it's going to be a little bit longer than usual. I'm still trying to condense it as much, but just so you have the information that's at hand. We should be streaming on Facebook. We should be streaming on YouTube. We should be streaming on Twitter. New gremlins, new technology. Please bear with us if you can't. I mean, we know you can hear us and hopefully see us all okay, which is great. But, you know, I don't know what platforms you're on. Hopefully it's fine. I'm going to keep going through the news. Remember, it's your channel, it's your program. If there's something you want to say about the things that we're saying, or if there's a question you want to push back, you want to share, it's cool. That's what we're there for. But I want to keep whizzing through. We're halfway through, and I know many of us want to eat dinner, so I'm gonna keep going. I've got enough work to do tomorrow as well. So I'm joking. I have to, because when you hear all this stuff, it does something to your head, your stress levels, everything. You have to be able to smile, or else you won't make it through the day. So let me go to the next news story. And I said I'm going to come back to this story, and I will. And you know, this. So the boy who was who killed 15-year-old Eliane and he went to court. He's been charged with murder. He can't be named. He's also been charged for carrying a knife in a public place. We don't know how he's going to plead. He's going to plead guilty or not guilty. I think that he's going to appear at Old Bailey. It's a serious case. I don't want to say too much on this. You know, it's still ongoing. It's fresh. It's new. I mean, the only thing I probably will say, and I'll try to be sensitive with this one, is that the murder of our young princess, while yes, it was done with a knife, I think one of the things we have to talk about and acknowledge is the fact that this was also misogyny. She was also murdered because she was a woman. Well, no, take that out of my mouth. That's adultification impersified, because she was a girl. That's why she was murdered. And that we live in a society that tolerates this kind of violence against a girl. She turned down someone's like amorous interests, and she was murdered. And what's happening in the media, you're probably noticing, is that all the discussion about this case in the mainstream media is focusing on knife crime. And I'm not saying that knife crime isn't an issue, but what I will say is that the percentage of people in our community, in London certainly, who engage in knife crime is probably less than 1%. Okay, we're talking about a tiny minority up to badness. Okay, but the reporting in the police is so disproportionate that they use it to justify racialized profiling and stop and searching, the abuse of our rights, putting dogs on children, using tasers on children, strip searching the intimate body parts of girls and menstruals in this school where they're supposed to be safe, because of that tiny percentage. And so they relish hearing an incident like this where we've lost another princess, and using that to say, look at them darky people over here. See how them all violent. You see, we need more police. We need more stop and search. We need to harass them wherever they are. When the reality of the situation is that when they do that, they're harassing innocent families, innocent children, and making things worse for all of us. This particular case, as much as it's about violent crime and knife crime, this is also about misogyny. It's about the growth of a culture where young boys, there's a term they use called incels, are so frustrated because they're seeing things, that the level of access to things like pornography that they have, they're seeing all this kind of stuff and expectations of girls and of women that they can't get in real life, and some of them can't handle it. They don't know how to manage it, and they've been told that women are blocking their aspirations, and that they're entitled to it. That man up. And if the girl don't give you what you want, just tamp her down and stuff like that. So there are other issues that we need to be discussing alongside this, and not just the violent knife crime angle. But I've seen on the news over the last few days, politicians from the Mayor of London all turn up in youth centres with community leaders talking about knife crime. It's the same narrative. I even heard one person in I think it was Croydon, but it was in South London, who starts a community centre, said, "This is not about needing more money. We need to work better with the money." He wasn't African, wasn't from our community, because no one who works with young people in our community and is trying to do serious work to help our young people, to get them to transform their poor levels of employability, to make sure that they can engage in enterprise, start their own business. And none of us will say it's not about money. But there's a lot of people eating off our misery, eating off the death and the pain that we have. And we have lost a 15-year-old princess, Elana Adam. She's a baby. I don't like hearing people exploiting that for their own personal gain. I don't like politicians coming into our community when they wouldn't even spit on us when we're on fire, because they know it's the right thing to do for PR reasons. So I'm going to leave that there, because the whole thing just affects me.
Yeah, I've got some comments from Mr. the 4-3 saying, resonating with some of what you've said. I've seen some really frustrating comments from people saying how this case is an example of a problem with our culture. And then he says, or that the people talking about this are only doing it for clout, and they won't keep the same energy for if it's a black boy that was stabbed. And lastly, he says, it's a tiny percentage, but I keep hearing how knife crime is apparently this epidemic that nobody cares about.
Yeah, we've been dealing with this issue. I mean, I live in Hackney, and my first rites of passage into activism and becoming a Pan-Africanist was dealing with gun crime, because in Hackney, where I live, we were dealing with young people walking around with guns shooting each other. And so that's when Operation Trident came about. And then what happened, it took a lot of work, a lot of trying to get money for youth centers, open up opportunities, improving education. Because it's not just the one thing, it's not just youth centers. You don't just magically make youth centers and then all badness goes away. When you're in a what they call it, a cost of living crisis like now, where people can't eat, look what's happening to statistics on shoplifting. It's going through the roof. If people can't eat because all the rich are just taking everything from our mouths, then what happens is that some people are going to engage in some kind of badness. Now, some badness, I'll be honest with you, it's not responsible for me to say so, but I don't business with, because they're not hurting anyone. They're taking bottles of water, they're making loaves of bread. I can't business with that. If we live in a society where people have to steal a bottle of water, then there's something wrong with society. But so obviously some badness goes further than that. So what you're saying is correct. People are talking about this epidemic of crime, but this epidemic of crime has always been here, because we are living in a far inequitable, unjust society, and things are getting continuously worse, despite a small elite getting progressively richer. And in Hackney, where this was the second poorest borough in the whole of the UK, because of regeneration, there's an element of this which is also gentrification. And so people here, who used to be able to just kind of like do a decent hustle, kind of like selling patties, running their own little, selling their own CDs, all whatever it is they're doing, they can't do that anymore. And Croydon, I don't live in Croydon, but I have family in Croydon. And Croydon, there's nothing wrong with the area, but the de-investment, I think their council went bankrupt just the other day. That's because you have a central government, this conservative thing. I'm not saying that it'll be better under the Starmer Party, but I'm just saying what happens is that they're squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, pulling public service and service. We have to survive. Regardless of what people are doing, we have to survive. So I'm not making an excuse for badness, and thank you for saying that. It's just that when I hear the words epidemic, I think it was an amazing young brother. I say young, but brother Akala. He's the one who introduced the idea that when you're dealing with narco, you want to deal with it holistically. You deal with it as a public health issue. You recognize how the causes go across the whole part of society, all parts, aspects of our lives. You don't just look at it as this criminal element that we are inhuman, that we're monsters, that we want to stab up each other because that's our culture. That whoever's writing that kind of stuff is just a fool. So this for me, we're not having these sophisticated discussions. What's happening is that the newspapers are running around every time a story like this happens, and then looking for community leaders, and the community leaders say, yeah, knives are bad, man. Yeah, knives are bad. We've got to stop stabbing each other. Yeah, we've got to stop stabbing each other. Yeah, knives are bad, man. Yeah, well, if we have more youth clubs, everything will be okay. Yeah, more youth clubs. Nah, it's not as simple as that. Let me move on.
Sorry, Toyin. Last thing. He says, Mr. the 4-3 says, I live in Wood Green, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I remember Wood. You know what? Give thanks. Let me move on to the next story, because, like I said, that one's still a bit raw. It's still fresh. And so let's what's that phrase that young people used to say? Let's keep it real. So let's also recognize that there is badness in our community. And our brother here, Akeem Francis Kerr, he was murdered on the dance floor. There's a brother called Edward Wilson stabbed him up because he was standing in his spot. He went to a club. I think the brother, the one who killed him, went to a toilet or something or whatever. Things moved. Our young prince here came back, was moving, talking with some women. The young boy came, and this is why I say misogyny is in this. The young boy came, found him talking to these women, got vexed, got jealous, got really angry, and he stabbed him and killed him. That was the reason, because he couldn't get a girl, because he thought this man was going to get the girl that he wanted. Do you see what I'm saying? It's easy to say this is knife crime, and you can say, yeah, of course he's walking around with a knife, there's something wrong. I'm not arguing that's not the case, but I'm saying it's deeper than that. It's deeper. How can a man kill another brother because he's in his place chatting to a couple of women that he don't even know? How many of you have heard about this story? I know I didn't. If I didn't have you out there as a community sharing some of these stories so I can look into it and research it, wouldn't know. And so when the narratives come out that, them black people, them are violent, them are, their culture, look at them at the carnival. You need to shut it down. We don't have a full picture. And some of these so-called community leaders need to hush them out. If you don't have the facts, hush them out. Go to someone who has the facts. and then learn, and then come back on TV or whatever and chat the truth. But don't just open and parrot the stuff that's been put into your mouth. We're having too much of that. Political blackface. We need to cut it out now. Let me move on. Now, some of you have...
So, sorry, Toyin, there's a message that came just before you changed the slide saying it's spiritual warfare from Frapoy 1.
People don't understand that, but thank you. That's exactly what it is. It's exactly, they've already locked down political warfare. Politically, we're out of the system. The way they mash up Dian, the way that politically, it's on lockdown. So all this is spiritual. All this is kind of like making us feel that we're worthless, internalizing these ideas that, and you know, I made a documentary called Beauty Is, and this is what I love, the wisdom of our young people. I was, like I said, blessed to speak with my brother Carlo on this, and we were just chatting about, you know, issues of crime, what it's about, and how it's linked to beauty. And I remember something he said to me, which was so profound. I left it in the video because it comes from, sometimes you just got to humble yourself when you meet people as well that you're in your life and you're thinking these things through. And he explained that if we find something beautiful, it's inherently difficult to destroy. You just can't do it. You can't destroy something that you think is beautiful. Your instinct is to protect it, is to nurture it, is to keep it safe. So spiritual warfare, what it has done to us, it's convinced us that we're ugly, that we're worthless, that we're not even human. And so we can look at a brother, we can look at a sister and see them as possessions, as objects, not as us, not as a mirror reflection of the divinity within us, but somehow we are less than. And when you think that, then you can damage it, then you can destroy it, then you can harm it. And that's spiritual warfare. And this education, which is needed in our community at all levels, is unfortunately not happening. It's not happening in our churches. We don't have the Saturday schools that we used to. Elders like the Huntleys, who set the foundation for what we're doing. People like Professor Gus John, who was taking care of our children who are being excluded. All those people who have been who could see something was wrong. We don't have that protection anymore. It's gone. We have more money. We have more resources. We have 24-hour internet, but we don't recognize that we're in a situation where there's a term called menticide, which is it's an African-American scholar who coined it. I've forgotten his name, my bad. So it fits where we are. Spiritual warfare. Spiritual warfare.
It's just a continuous drip effect, isn't it, of the negativity of our community. And it just continues. It goes from younger children all the way up to elders, you know, and it's really, really disheartening to see that we can think when we look at each other that we are not a beautiful reflection of each other. That is just so stressful. I mean, there are some African Saturday schools, people doing homeschooling and so on. But it's not enough, you know.
Not the same way it used to be in the 80s.
It's not the same, you know. There's some. I mean, there's probably a handful that we could name, but there's not enough.
No, that's true. And I shouldn't say there's none. There are, but a lot of the Saturday school programs that we have now are doing what I call catch-up work. So the original Saturday school programs were doing, you know, work on the curriculum, but they also did cultural enhancement. So they were, you know, cultural awareness. So students that went to those schools didn't just engage in kind of like whatever they were doing at school, but they were learning about their history. They were learning about, they were engaging in rites of passage. They were engaging in all kind of different activities. So what happened was that they recognized that as they grew up, they had a responsibility to the community and to the world. And so you'd form children who would actually go out and want to contribute, and they would give benefits that didn't just affect just our community, that go to other communities, because they were fully rounded, developed human beings who loved themselves and wanted the best for everyone. But what's happening now is that we're just often the Saturday schools that I'm seeing, which are doing amazing work, and I'm not trying to diminish them, but they're just trying to keep the students up to kind of like the curricula, because everything is so quantified about getting that mark, getting that exam grade, whatever it is. There's no space for any extracurricular work, which is what we need. that stuff that developers. I mean, the strange thing is that platforms like YouTube is providing alternative education systems, and that's really amazing, but it's unregulated. So it does mean that the likes of the Tates of this world, who provide some amazing, and I'll say it, you know, amazing, useful information for I don't know, developing the self-confidence in self to young men, but also mixes some of these truths that he uses with some of the most darkest and most, you know, vile misogynist ideas. And so what happens is that our young people can't separate the good stuff from the awful stuff, and that's unregulated. And I'm using him as an example, and I shouldn't do, because he's not the only example. You know what I mean? People don't even think about people like Elon Musk and stuff like that. There's loads of them that you don't see coming, who are also dripping this misogyny and this anti-African, this you know, this Afrophobic kind of content, and our children are absorbing it. So I say children, also our adults. But I know time is going. This is like a mega long program, so I'm trying to.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd be finished by 9, but I don't know.
I'm not looking at the time. I'm just running through what we're going to talk about. So you know what I mean. Okay, this story, I don't know if everyone's seen the clip. This is the story of the young princess, the African girl, who was not given a medal at an Irish gymnastic event ceremony, and this went viral. This happened, I think it was like a year ago, 18 months ago. It was in Dublin, and I saw it on Twitter, you know, a week or two ago. And what happens, again, you can find it yourself. They're handing out medals, and then the woman handing out the medal keeps on skipping the sister. And the only thing that's different between the sister and everyone else is that she's an African. It's the only thing that's different. So what's happened is that the video went viral. No, let me put it correctly. Let me get in chronological order. That happened. The parents complained. The response wasn't that good. The parents continued complaining. Now, a year later, the video recycles because the case was taken up by a campaign group called Sport Against Racism Ireland. And they reached out to our sister, the world champion gymnast, Simone Biles. And Simone sent the family a video of support. Now, once our sister, Simone, had done that, the story just went, it just went out there massive. So not only just the video going viral, but also the fact that here's this world-class gymnast from our community, you know, just kind of like saying, nah, here's my solidarity with you. And so the organization apologizes. So this is now the family saying, well, the apology you're giving me now is useless. It's like my daughter had to deal with this for a year of like, what's wrong with her? Asking her questions. Why was I treated like this? Why was I invisible? What did I do wrong? I was polite. I didn't, you know, I didn't, hey, miss, nothing like that. I was just, you know, I've been taught just to kind of like be reasonable. It could have been a mistake. What did I do wrong? And now you're apologizing to us because the whole world is scrutinizing you. This apology is nonsense. This is what you call it, damage limitation, an exercise. This is you just trying to protect your image. So I want you to share that story. I know we do have a facility to show videos, but the problem is, it's like there's so much work to do on this program, and just out in general, uploading the videos and stuff like that. I haven't got the time to do that, but just watch it and make your own decision about it. No.
Sorry, Christopher says that he just saw it yesterday.
Yeah. No, make your decision for yourself. It took 18 months for them to apologize for that. 18 months. Does that say to you that the apology is genuine? I don't think so. Let me run to the next story. This one I don't have much background in, much knowledge in. Again, this is one of the ones that have been shared by researchers, so I'm just seeing it. But this one is quite interesting because this is a story about colonial what do you call them? Hordes, colonial hordes being discovered to have held the skulls of our African ancestors for over 100 years. Now, this particular story is of an archive that was in Berlin. And the skulls of our ancestors have essentially been stored there as war trophies. But in this particular case, there was a DNA test done with one of the living descendants who come from Tanzania. and they're saying we want it back. It's like, how dare you kind of like hold our ancestors in a little box, and and doing what? He never knew. His name is Zablon Kiwelu. He never knew that his father's skull had been there gathering dust in this Berlin cellar for decades. And one of the things you've got to remember, if you're talking about spirituality, is that they couldn't. It's like even with the skull, they can't bury him because they've got to bury the whole body. It's like, it's a ritual. So they don't know, even if they get it back, they're still arguing, what do we do? Do we then put this in a museum and share this story so people know what's going on? It's like, it's scary. It's really scary. And the story of the skull as well, I did try and find out some more information. The person, the word Akida is written on it. And it's the name of a high-ranking warrior and advisor of the leader of the Chaga people in Tanzania. And what happened was that this warrior group defeated the Germans who came to invade. So they were colonizing, and so he led a clan. They defended them, their land, and got rid of them. And so what happened was that Germany came back at another time, and then they defeated the clan. And they took the skull as a trophy. That's how it came to be in Berlin. And so you hear these kind of things going on. We talk about spiritual warfare. And then this other story is one about the story of a lock of hair from a young Ethiopian prince. Now, he passed away some 140 years ago. And now this lock of hair has been handed back to representatives in his country. But, his body was stolen, and I say stolen, in 1868. It was taken after an invasion, a colonial invasion. And his father, I think, killed himself after this, and he ended up in the UK, had a really horrible upbringing. He passed away at the age of 18. Looks like he must have killed himself. He was buried in Windsor near London, and the family been asking for his body back. Give us his body, give us our body, give us his body. They didn't give it back. But now, give credit where credit's due, and that's a very slim credit. They've actually given a lock of his hair back to the family. And one of the members of the Ethiopian Heritage Restitution National Committee has said that they welcome the fact that the hair's come back, but that should just be the start. They want all of the Ethiopian artifacts that have been looted by that exhibition in 1968 to come home. But this is a start. This is some ghoulish stuff, but this is news. When I say this is not 100 years ago, it's not 50 years ago. This is not, 10 years ago. This is like a couple of days ago. This is new. This is still going on.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that I hope whenever we get our artifacts, or in fact remains of our ancestors, whenever they're returned after being, stolen, I hope that our people just put down some serious prayers on them, because God knows what they did with those belongings. I just dread to think. I just hope that they put down some serious, spirituality. Oh, it just sickens me, these people.
Yep. Next story. Some of you will know about this. This is where do I start? I'll try and summarize for the time. There was again viral video went around the internet after a woman was accused of theft, but she hadn't stolen anything, and the shopkeeper was caught on camera strangling her. Now, again, this happened in Peckham. She had bought. So let me give you the background. So she bought some hair products. She wasn't happy with them. She went back to the shop. She said, "I want a refund." He said, "We've got a no refund policy. You can't have a refund." She said, "I want a refund. This is no good. I want a refund policy." So she left the product that she bought, and she took something else to the value of what she had bought. Just saying, "Well, That's no good. I'm not having that. You see the man, some massive hulk of a man, grab her and then strangle her by the throat. And like, it's like, when you, I can't even explain it. You had to see the video for yourself. And, you know, the police came eventually. She was the one who was arrested. But the video was already being made. And so the community, and I'm talking about really the Pan-African community, have come out in force and gone to the shop and said, no, you ain't doing that to sisters. We already have bad treatments in many hair shops selling products for African people. We're not putting up with this on top of that. And so he's been in hiding. I think the shop is still closed because the protesters are still outside the shops every day. So he's frightened to open up. The police finally, again, this is, you know, social media pressure. They finally came out and questioned the shopkeeper under caution. Whether he's going to be charged for disproportionate use of violence against her or anything like this, I don't know. Again, people are like, well, you know, he's just a shopkeeper. I've heard I've heard people from our community saying he's just a shopkeeper protecting his property. Well, you know, that don't wash. She's a sentient human being. It's like everything was being filmed by his video cameras. It's like she posed no threat. This again is misogynal. And when I say misogynal, I'm talking about violence against women, but particularly African women, because he would never, ever have done that to a European woman. Ever. We know this. And so, you know, I don't know the guy. I don't know his history. All I know was that he saw red and he saw someone that he thought he could abuse and get away with because he felt that she was powerless. And he felt she was powerless because she was an African woman. So, I mean, you know, the good news is that the London Trading Standards are now going to investigate the issues around this no refund policy that he was talking about, because according to the Consumer Right Act 2015, retailers must offer a full refund if an item is faulty or it doesn't match as it's described or it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So any kind of blanket statement saying we don't offer a refund, it's actually illegal. It just doesn't wash. So we'll see what happens. But like, you know, good that the community came out and, you know, kind of made it clear that actually you can't treat us like that. It's just you don't. Right now, people are starting to see the violence that's committed against women and how it manifests itself, and people are filming it as well. I'm not for one moment pretending that as a man, that, you know, and as a father with two sons and you know what I mean, but I ain't petrified about the violence that they face from people who look like them, who are kind of like, you know, socialized in a way that they hate themselves, and a state system that's institutionally kind of like Afrophobic and violent, and as well as being racist. Those things bug me. But I also have a daughter. I have my wife who's there. Thank you. And it fills me with dread to think that women are still subject to this level of violence, and we just turn a blind eye to it. So anyway, that's my rant done on that one.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly say, Toyin, if that's okay, that I actually went to one of those days outside the shop in Peckham and overheard a variety of different sisters saying that something similar happened to them. Not necessarily the throttling, but the kind of disrespect that they show towards us when you know, or we know, that we spend so much money in their shops. And it's not only the hair shops, it's also food shops, it's everything. And, you know, it's time that we recognize that if we're not being treated correctly, that we should take our business elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. If you're being harassed and if you're walking in the shop and then they start following you around the shop because they think you might steal something, I don't go back to that shop. I'm just not on it. I'm just not going to go back to that shop. You know, I would rather spend another 50 pence a pound going to a shop that, you know, is owned by our people. That's just it. And that's my mindset, you know, not now, it's been like that for a long time. But, you know, I think more of us need to think, really, if we're not getting the business the way we should get it, then we need to just, let our feet do the talking, you know?
Well, there's something to be said about being an ethical consumer, and I've seen the tactic work really well with things like climate change and with veganism. 'Cause obviously, I'm a vegetarian, and it works. It means you don't put your money into businesses that violate your ethical values.
Yeah.
And I think often, like I say, these shops have poor customer service, they have disrespect, so just don't shop there. And one of the beautiful things that I saw happen on social media over the last couple of weeks is that there have been some sisters actually leading campaigns and just sharing details of African-owned businesses that sell the same products. And I for me, that took me back to when I started Legally. That took me back to days when we actually used to get off our butt and do stuff rather than just sit there and tweet every 5 seconds. And it was just nice. It was the one time I thought to myself, just seeing us using digital technology in a way that can empower us. It's still not quite the same thing like the Black Panther and the breakfast clubs, but it's kind of like letting people know that actually we can all help, we can all contribute. But the thing that goes beyond just sending tweets out of shops is actually you also going to the shop, ordering things from their online portal, just giving them a little bit of support. We need that, especially during these times. But I'm glad you went, and thank you for sharing that. Okay, let me go to a next story. And this one, I'm going to have a little bit of bias because our brother is a friend of mine, but it doesn't change the kind of like the veracity of what I'm going to say. This is the story about Professor Hakim Adi. I mean, he wouldn't like me to say it's about him because it's actually, and he will rightly say it's actually about the Save the Emeries of History of Africa and History on African Diaspora course. But I would also say it's about him because he was the first professor of African history in the UK of African heritage. And his course was shut down recently by the University of Chichester. Now, this is just a disgusting state of affairs. Our brother has his contribution to academia, to our awareness of African history. I've got several of his books behind me. They're amazing. I use them on my course. His current story about the story of African Caribbean people in the UK is as a masterpiece. It's up for a Wolfson award, actually, which is a famous book award. But what happened was that this University of Chichester decided to do some mathematics, kind of decide whether it was cost effective, and decided to shut down his course. And that meant that his students were left stranded without the required expertise, because Professor Hakim, whether the university wants to admit or not, is actually one of a kind. He is an exemplar. His knowledge on our history is unparalleled, and they no longer have him as their supervisor. And so but more so than that, what Professor Hakim did, our brother, he saw the statistics that African people weren't engaging in the study of history, that we were just really underrepresented. There was something about it that was not attracting us. And so we were really kind of like allowing, I won't say we were allowing, but the consequence of that was that other people were writing our history for us. And so he set up, and with young people, something called the Young Historians Project. And it was a project after, he did a conference. It was an amazing conference I remember attending, that encouraged young people to think about a career in history. And, it's been amazingly successful. And, it's not finished its job. The whole idea is to get young people from college, secondary school, interested in history, get them to do the undergrad, to masters, to PhD, and then to start writing histories, producing books, start going on television, making films, documentaries about the story. He started that work. This is history, living history. His achievements have been amazing. I can't even talk about the research in his books like African, Pan-Africanism and communism. I mean, he's done some amazing work across a wide area of our history. But this particular work in nurturing and developing a cohort of students from a young age to actually see history as something that they can study and be practitioners of. That thing about the lion must write its own story, or the hunter always glory the hunter. This is an amazing achievement. And this situation where the University of Chichester said, like, well, hold on. It's like, you haven't had enough students as far as we're concerned. It's like we're spending a lot of money and we're not getting enough fees back. It's rubbish. Sometimes you have to do things because it's morally right. Do you think that the people who take PPE in Oxford. That's politics, philosophy, and economics, and end up in Parliament. Do you think that has a cost-effective kind of like calculations assigned to it? Do you think that the world won't go on if PPE just stops being taught? Of course not. So what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we're studying. It's like sickle cell. It's the same thing. I'm going to talk about sickle cell later on. It's like sometimes, even though there might not be a large amount of people compared to the ethnic majority engaged in the topic, we had to recognize that it's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. And sometimes that economics cannot come into this equation. And we see this when Europeans go to war. The amount of money they spend in war, I can't even talk about the Ukraine situation, and the amount of billions that have been spent supporting the Ukraine war is disproportionate if you compare it to how much they're not putting into eradicating poverty, making sure homelessness is stamped out, making sure that nobody goes to sleep without something in their tummies that they can eat, stamping out crime. They could do it. They choose not to. So I'm going a bit over because it's a personal issue for me. But this is a story that's happened over the last couple of months. Our brother was, he did lose his job. The MREs, the master's course program has been shut down. So we don't have a program now in the UK on the history of Africa and African diaspora at all. There was a massive campaign. Tens of thousands of people from all over the world supported it. There's now a fundraiser. I know I should have put it on here. There's a fundraiser taking place at B6 College. So if you're in London, B6 College is doing, he's launching his book fair, and the proceeds of that are going to go to the legal aid, or the legal fund to support the defense against this. He's going to be represented by our sister Jacqueline McKenzie. So I told you she was a good egg, right? So it's not just dealing with immigration, not just dealing with the Windrush family. She's also supporting us with this. I don't know what else to say on this. Just don't close your eyes to these attacks that come from every angle. It's not just the police, it's not just the government, it's not just the state. This is also academia. People making decisions not based on ethics or morals, but just because it's easy for them to do, because they think that we can fire him and no one's going to give a fuss. No one's going to bother about it. Let me move on to the next story. Okay, I'm going to close this section with this is what I call political blackface. I think our brother Nels because was it racial laundering or something. Essentially, what's happened is that this sister Dominique Samuels, she's turned whistleblower, and she's revealed that papers like the Daily Mail have actually been ghostwriting the racist articles and using the identity of African people to present it. And it's probably obvious, but it kind of says not just what that means to the newspaper, but what it means to the people who have allowed their names to this. So she admitted on social media that there was an article that was published with her name on it, and it called something like "This Clash of the Roles was about culture, not color." But she says and admitted now that even though it says it's written by her, it had a picture on it and everything like that, she didn't write it. Some European now in the Daily Mail wrote it, and they paid her, and they just published it. And you think, but you took the money. Why did you do this for? Why are you changing now? And the reason why she decided to speak out on this, which to her credit, and I had to give her credit that she whistleblowed, because this year she actually went to Carnival, Nottingham Carnival, and she had a good time. And then what happened? The Daily Mail called her up. Got some coin for you. They said, coin? Oh, okay, good. What's it for? And they said, well, we've written this piece, and she said it was verging on racist. She said it was, it was talking about a carnival, and she said it was a complete misrepresentation of what she saw or what she felt, everything, and she just couldn't put a name to it. And she just couldn't do it. And so she's exposed it, and we've now found out that a lot of those other African people that you see in those racist papers, they're not even writing all the things that they put into their name. I mean, they're the scum of the earth as far as I'm concerned. That's the lowest of the lowest. If I don't mind people have different views from me, I have no problem with that. And if share your views and we can go into debate if I can be bothered, that's fine. But to let other people write things that are Afrophobic, that attack our community, and then to take money so that they can hide the white supremacist authors and use your face on it. It's despicable. And but she, to her comment, to her credit, she's come out and exposed it, and now we're finding more other writers who have done the same. And we'll keep an eye on this particular topic. But this is the state of what's going on in Britain. You know, so there's a phrase that I often talk about called the illusion of inclusion. And so just sometimes because you see our face everywhere, you know what I mean, doesn't mean things have changed. Representation, you know, it doesn't mean that we're not being misrepresented. It doesn't mean that anything's changed. It doesn't mean any progressiveness is taking place. It just means that we're visible in places. And those people actually are not kinfolk. You know, I mean, they're just skin folk. All right, let me go to, I think this might be the last section of the program. My memory is gone now. And just as a reminder, you are with myself, Dr. Toyin Agbetu, with Sister Oleander, and we're just going through the news from the last 12 weeks. It's an extended program. We didn't expect it to be this long, but like I said, there's quite a lot to go through. And we're just catching up with not everything, because it's impossible to cover everything that's taken place in the last 3 months, but we're just giving you a flavour of what's taking place in the UK. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, I think Twitter. This is the first time we've actually attempted to link to the Twitter thing. I'm a bit leery about that. It's lovely to have you sharing your comments. So, you know, those of you who are on Facebook, who are on YouTube, you can say hi. You know, we know we're going out live now. Thank you for those who've commented so far and let us know that you can hear us clearly. This is the final stretch. And I'm going to continue on with the news. I'm going to try and speed up really quick. So the first story is one of the British boxing governing body being exposed as still, I say still, many of us didn't even know, suspect being caught in the middle of a race row. And it's facing allegations of being involved in discrimination and victimization of people from minority communities. So Channel 4 did a story on this, covering it, fighters and people who are inside the sport are saying that their organization don't investigate complaints properly. And so we have referees in boxing, for example, who are taking their claims to court, etc. There's nothing new here. Racism in boxing. I realized I forgot to add another story to this. While we was away, I also saw a similar story about racism in cricket. And there was a massive scandal. It's not on the slides, but there was also a massive scandal in cricket. And they've exposed Afrophobic content, racist content, and they're trying to clean up, you know, kind of like what's going on inside there. But again, we need to be aware of this because often, because I don't watch boxing, sometimes I forget that all the things that happen in society are also happening in these individual sports.
Sorry, Toyin. Rabbi says, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for staying with us on this journey. I know I can rabbit on a bit, so it's much appreciated, and I hope it's helpful. Thank you for joining us as well. This particular story here is one about racism in football. We've covered this time and time again. This is a news story. There's a player, Wes Fodring, I think that's how you pronounce it. He went on Instagram and exposed how he'd suffered threats to his family, racist comments after his football team loss. You know what I mean? And he just said, like, you know, it hurts. Why did you have to do this? Why did you have to threaten my family? I mean, what's you know? It's a bloody game. And this guy, I don't know him, the boss, was it Heckingbottom? He said that the police are now involved. And he said that he's disgusting that racism is still prevalent in the game and there's no space for it and stuff like that. So he's got the support of the management. But football, it's a long journey. I just realised we hadn't even talked about, well, it's probably outside the scope of this programme, about the kiss that the head of the FIFA head did in the females football game. And but he's resigned now, and he still hasn't admitted what he did was wrong. But you know, we've got to be aware of all these things. Another similar story, if we're sticking with football, is the story of our sister Hawa Sissoko. And she's actually come out now and saying that social media companies need to do much more to protect players from racist abuse. Now, I didn't see the match. Like I said, I don't do boxing or I don't do football. And what happened, there was a clash. She was playing with Sarah Mailing from Aston Villa. There was pushing between them and all sort of stuff. And then what happened was that our sister, she struck the woman across her face, while playing and stuff like that. She was sent off. And the other player, she got a yellow card. So they were both pushing and tearing. And so our sister apologized, and she said there was no excuse for her behavior, which was really good that she did that. She was given a too much ban and a fine. But on social media, they came for her and they just bombarded her with racist abuse. And she was saying she knew it happened in a men's game, and she, to see it happen in a women's game as well. So it's not just there's something sick when it comes to racism in the UK. So I just thought I'd share that with you. It's not just the male players who face racist abuse, it's also the female players. What can I say? We're going to go through a couple of slides on the topic of health. I've kind of used to have something called a good news section, but we've kind of like merged it all into one. So just for this week, because there's just not enough time. We normally do this. How long do we normally take? I think we take an hour, don't we? Normally it's like just under an hour, but this one's going on quite a bit. It's quite a lot of slides. So, okay, first story is of the nursing watchdog, which is called NMC, which is a Nursing and Midwife Council. Surprise, surprise, a whistleblower has come out and said that the council has failed to address racism in its ranks, and so the regulator is having to launch yet another investigation into itself, into racism. The nurses have complained about all kinds of incidents. We're talking about tying a Sikh's patient's beard with plastic gloves, leaving in his own urine, offering him food he couldn't eat for religious reasons, all kinds of, sick, racist kind of things that are basically acts of discrimination due to his ethnicity. So these claims have all come up and been leaked to the newspaper, The Independent, because the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the NMC, has not really been doing enough. And so staff are saying, like, we really need you to pull your socks up because we don't feel protected. And what we're seeing happen to patients isn't right as well. So there you go. I'm not going to elaborate much more on that because of time. And this is a story which is close to my heart, sickle cell. A young sister, I say young sister, she's 30, Nadine Dos Santos. She had sickle cell disorder. She suffered from a crisis, but she passed away at the age of 30 in Ipswich. She didn't pass away from the crisis itself, which people think, well, why are you saying sickle cell? She passed away from an acute pulmonary embolism, which is essentially a large blood clot, which caused a blockage in her lung. And the reason why this is linked to sickle cell, which is because even with all the medical gains and all the knowledge that we have on this disorder, she went into hospital and, she was talking about being in pain. They discharged her. She was at risk of this. But she went home. She called her mum saying that, she couldn't manage this. It was really bad. Her stepfather came to the house to see her and found her on the floor. And she had this pulmonary and she passed away. So, it's the postmortem was saying it's not sickle cell. It is this that took her life. But the issue why this is a sickle cell issue is because she was in a serious crisis. And the desire to discharge her quickly without making sure all her underlying conditions had been taken care of, many people believe, including myself, led to this taking place. There's an amazing, myself and Sister Oleander have been Sister Oleander more so than me now. I've been out of community work for a little while, unfortunately. But Sister Oleander is part of a group called, oh my God, Solace. Actually, my brain just froze for a second. I've been the chair of the group for how many years? And it's a sickle cell support group. And, I remember I was talking with Oleander. I don't know if you want to say what we were talking about the other day, that what's happening is that when I was, well, before I started working in university, and I was, you know, more hands-on with the Solace group and stuff like that, we used to force the hospital to publish how long it took them to administer a pain relief and it is easier. There's guidelines, we call them the NICE guidelines, that say that someone's having a sickle cell crisis, they must get treatment within the first 20 minutes, because what happens if you take too much longer, it leads to risks of complications like this. And what happened was that numbers, there used to be like hour long, and we started to come down because we were scrutinizing it. I was writing newsletters, publishing it continuously. But now that I haven't been able to do that, the group's still meeting, so it's still doing its self-care and peer-to-peer support. So that's still going, but the scrutiny level that I used to do isn't happening. And just Oleander, I don't know, you want to discuss what's happening back, what you're hearing? You're muted.
Sorry, yeah. In the WhatsApp group, which I mostly manage, we have about 120 members, and we're just at the moment sharing some experiences that we've been having as patients and carers and parents. And there's been some really awful, you know, some people have been sitting in a chair, not being given either a cubicle or a bed for more than 4 hours, and waiting that length of time, or maybe a bit less than that, for their first pain relief. And as Toyin said, within the first 30 minutes, they should have their at least the first pain relief. And it's not just about that. It's also about the care or non-care that some of the nurses have. And so a few people have been saying what they do now is they try and look for someone who is someone that's known to them, a nurse that's known to them, because some of the other nurses are just you wonder why they actually joined the profession. And yeah, but I mean, I could honestly tell you so many stories, but the idea anyway is for us to collect as many as we can, and then we're going to try and find a way to get the head of the A&E to come and talk to the group, because that's what I think we need to start doing that all over again, sadly.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I mean, and this is really important, because you see what happens when you're in crisis is like your body's in a heightened condition, you know, blood's rushing everywhere, you're in pain, your oxygen use is going up, so your organs are stressed, and if you're not getting treatment, everything gets worse, the strain on your organ gets worse, and this is what leads to kind of like clots, this is what leads to strokes, all these kind of episodes. So it really starts with getting on top of that pain quickly, effectively, and just staff having compassion. And so what happens, a lot of deaths happen, and sometimes it's not the sickle cell directly that's caused it, because we had the technology, we have the medicine, we have the treatments to kind of manage it so people can live a long, healthy life, you know, with it. What happens is that not being there when the crisis hit. When the crisis hit, you know, and what burns me is that if we take our finger off the ball for like 5 minutes, everything just resets. And that's why I engage in writing policy now. But even then, you have to hold them up to account to the policy. So yeah. Anyway, I just want to share that with you. And the next slide is also linked to sickle cell, which is, thank you, Sister.
Sorry, Toyin, just to
okay.
it's been there a little while. Christopher says, thanks for this program. Black people have been mistreated for the longest while, and people have been getting away with it. But in recent times, because of technology, justice is done sometimes.
Yeah, and that's, we have to all become citizen journalists. We have mobile phones in our pockets, and we can film things, we can record things, we can share it with people who, if we don't want to talk about it, we can share it with someone else who can write it for us and present on our, you know, on our concerns. So thank you, Brother Christopher, for that. I mean, you're right, justice it's a slow process, and it can be frustrating, but it's there. But I think what this program is really about is just reminding us that we can't wait for others to deliver us justice. That never works. We had to be an active agent in driving change forward, and sometimes it's not fair, and sometimes it means that we're doing 5 jobs when everyone else is just having a laugh and stuff, and people are wondering, why are you always so serious, when, you know, I mean, you're just tired because you're just doing it. But that's, unfortunately, it comes with the territory. I'll go to the next slide about sickle cell, and this is really just one talking about that demand for the blood subtype RO has increased since 2016, and we just need more donors. I don't want to go into too much detail, but what's happening is that kind of like donation has dropped, demand has increased. We need more donors. I think September is sickle cell awareness month. I didn't hear much this year, which always worries me when we have a month dedicated to awareness. And it's like right now we're in so-called Black History Month. I call it African History Month, but this is where we're at. And I remember my brother Kwaku and sister Sarah for a while. They had this campaign holding councils to account, because what was happening was that people weren't talking about history, which is why the work of Professor Hakeem Hadi is so important. It was an entertainment month. What people were talking about was kind of like, oh, can you do a dance or something, or or just talking about the same old history, same old people, without actually updating it and making it relevant. So again, sickle cell, we need a drive to remind people that blood transfusions are key, and those transfusions have to come from people of African heritage to make sure that they're compatible. That's because sometimes that's a life or death situation if we can't get that blood. Okay, last couple of stories. This one I didn't hear about, so thank you for sharing with me. This is from one of our researchers. This is the story of Yvette MacDonald, who supports and brings together vulnerable and lonely women in London. And she's been awarded, or nominated, I should say, for BBC Make a Difference Award. And I like that. I haven't heard of this before. She's a funder of an organisation called Just Be. And she's been hosting events and activities for isolated people and the elderly for the past 14 years. So, I mean, even if she doesn't win this BBC Make a Difference Award, I think that we should give her props. I mean, the ceremony is going to take place in a few days at Tate Modern, but it's good. It's really good to hear that, and it's important that we have our own awards for these kind of scenarios, that we recognise the people. Because one of the things that I often talk about, with one of the good things at lockdown that I noticed, was that there was something at lockdown that brought out the best in many people, even people who, often wouldn't talk to us because, they might have a racist upbringing and stuff like that. I started to see some of that being submerged, started to see that some of that coming down a little bit. And people were helping people who were lonely, who didn't have food. They were befriending people. They were looking after elders. And it was just beautiful. There was just a level of community that came during that time. And of course, we had all people talking about vaccines and stuff like that. But I just started to see the humanity of people, and I'm missing that. Everything seems to be rapidly going back to the way it was before, as if that was something, something good. So it's great to hear of his sister who's been doing this for 14 years. Anyway, let me leave that at that. And okay, the last slide is I blush a little bit. This is me. What can I say? I mean, essentially this week I was fortunate to meet the amazing Claire White. She's the wife of the late Joe White, and I met her and her family just down the road from here, actually, in Hoxton, and we took down a sign of an old slaver that had been used on a park for I don't know long. I mean, for probably decades. And we just replaced the name with the name Joe White, who was a local basketball hero who inspired the community. There's much more I could say about him because of time. But what I'm just trying to say is that we often think that these things can't change, that they're always going to be there. And, it was through working with an amazing team we call them the RRR group, which is, and I can never remember the acronym. It's reflect, research, and remove or something, or replace. And what we do, we find the names of colonialists and slavers in Hackney, and we find buildings that are named after them, parks, roads, all the kind of things we could do. And then what we do, we then ask people, okay, we've got some alternative names. What do you have ideas for names? And then we take down the toxic symbols and put up good names. And this was a good day. The sun came out, it blessed us. It was a lovely meeting. Like our sister Claire and her family And it was just a piece of good news. That's how I wanted to end today's program. It's just a good news that change is happening. It's slowly. I mean, this might just think like it's just a sign, but what it says, if you live in an area and you help people and you do the right thing, you look after, then even when you become an ancestor, there's going to be some of us working to make sure that you get your props. I mean, you have your props in ancestral realm, but over here, we'll remember you. We don't need to have the name of enslavers and colonists, and we're coming for there's a in fact I won't say what we're doing next, because the moment I say that, all of the racists will come out and start trying to interfere. But we're coming for all of those racist symbols, all those racist names, so that our children can walk around without names of their enslavers taunting them in their face and statues of them. So I just want to pick up the people in our group, Lucy and Goma. There's also officers there like Emma. There's also Talia. There's young people from B6. It's a community that makes this work. I might be the big mouth and I might be in the photo and stuff like that, but even Councillor Williams, who's the head of equalities, we're all working together to do different things like this. We might argue at times, and we certainly do, but it happens. And even though we might not make a lot of noise, because sometimes you have to work quietly to get things through, trust me, we're still doing the work. Whew. I think that's it. Yes, I think that's it. Well, okay, that was a marathon. I think that's probably the longest we have done. Yeah. I hope it's helpful. I've still got a hell of a lot of preparation to do for next week, because I'm starting my course. I'm teaching again, so there's a lot of prep work and marking and stuff. I've got to finish all tomorrow before Tuesday. But it's good to be back. Thank you for staying with us and joining us, and making us feel like what we're doing has value. We know it has value. We appreciate you. We are you. If you think that this is helpful, tell people to subscribe, tell them to join, tell them to share it. Let others see what's going on. We're going to keep doing this. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. I can't remember. I don't know what the date is in a couple of weeks' time, but 2 weeks from now, we'll be back, probably exhausted again. It won't be as long as this program, because it'll be over the 4 weeks news. Sister Oleander, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, so Christopher just says, I just subscribed and hit the like button. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. You know what? That's so good. Sorry. Thank you. We need more subscriptions. I mean, the funny thing is that if we get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, then we can broadcast live. And even though I know that there are so many people out there who watch and share this, and they download it and put it in WhatsApp and stuff like that, we still don't have the 1,000, and so we still can't broadcast live. And that's a shame. But you know what? It's an archive. It's a piece of history for all of us. When I'm an ancestor, I'm hoping that our children and their children's children will look back and understand, when lies are coming their way, what the real history is. And that's what we're doing.
And Black Lives Matter UK says, good stuff.
Oh, give thanks. And likewise yourself as well. We see what you're doing as well. And we know that they came for you and you still stood firm. So give thanks as well. It's like I said, it's nice having everyone along with us as well. And again, just subscribe, let people know, and but everyone do their thing. What's that saying? Every mickle make a muckle. All got to do our little piece.
And BCESG UK says, great to have you both back. You have been missed.
Oh, and we missed you as well. Give thanks. And it's good to be here. And like I said, this is the longest program we've done, so it's nice to know that you stayed with us on there. And thank you. And we will be back. I mean, it's just that after term finishes, I'm exhausted, and we need a little break just to. In fact, and we're not even taking a break. When we're not here, we're still working full on. But this takes a lot to put this together every 2 weeks. So thank you for being with us. And I also want to big up Tony Warner and Quaker as well, and the Anti-University, which I did an anti-university event last night as well. And I mean, because Tony does the Black History Walks, and he's done some amazing work getting textbooks into schools as well. And I went on a walk with him today, and it was amazing. I mean, the brother's knowledge is phenomenal, and he's been doing that work for, again, the same time when I started. I remember he was doing the Education Through Film program, and people don't know. Kwaku's been doing the same thing, Brother Kwaku from the BMC. I mean, all, you know, there's so many of us doing it who just don't get their props. You know, we are not community leaders. You know, so it's cool. We don't want the glory. We just want people to do the work. Yeah. Okay. So we sign off.
Yep, we should.
Okay.
Just lastly, Christopher says every mickle make a muckle. That's Jamaican, isn't it? Yes, it is, Chris. Yes, it is, Christopher. It
I'm a
is Jamaican.
Pan-Africanist. I claim everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Jamaican in its origin, but it goes through all of us same way.
Definitely. Well, look,
I just say bye-bye, everybody. And it's been great being back, and look forward to seeing you guys again next time. As Toyin says, it probably won't be as long as today, but no matter how long it is, we'll do our best to keep things moving. Take care and get ready for winter.
Yeah. Nothing more for me to say to that. Thank you to all of you for being with us, for our researchers, our supporters. We're still there, even if you don't see us frontline. We're still there doing the work in the background. And see you in a couple of weeks' time. And as ever, please be careful, be safe, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe.